already way too excited to start talking about saxophone. Like we're kind of losing our minds here. Hi, everyone. Happy New Year and welcome to OSA Backstage. I'm Dani Meyer, and on today's episode, Serena and I are talking with concert saxophonist, or saxophonist, as the British say, Robert Young. Guys, what a treat. Robert is just lovely. I cannot wait for you to listen to him right now, but also if you are able to be in Omaha for Masterworks 3, to hear him on Guillaume Connaissant's Ode to John Coltrane, A Kind of Train. Solo saxophone is one of the coolest things to witness on a concert stage, especially because it was invented to be there to begin with. And then you might say that the stubbornness and the pettiness of the French, it waylaid some of that for a while, but it's definitely found a home. You've seen saxophone in action at some of our concerts, but definitely not like this. You're going to have to come check it out, just like you're definitely going to enjoy this interview. Robert's a treat. Saxophone's a treat. Thanks for being here. Enjoy. I haven't been as excited since we did our Piccolo episode because it's like a completely for something that I spent a lot of time around as a younger person. This is like a completely foreign origin story to me. So thank you so much for doing this.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm going to blow the roof off of things by starting with what we should have been recording. Serena revealed that she played flute and bari sax growing up.
It was one of those you can't play flute in jazz band, and so it was a pretty good offer. I got to play the bass line for once, and I remember the first couple of notes I played, I couldn't really differentiate the pitch down there. So it's just obviously, but that was a long time ago.
I'm sure you still have it.
Just get this woman a bari sax and we'll be just fine. Do you have any questions before we start, or do you mind just kicking off?
Sure, we can just kick off.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. Well, please introduce yourself.
My name is Robert Young. I'm a saxophonist, and I'm thrilled to be joining the Omaha Symphony in January on I think it's January 16th and 17th.
Awesome. We are thrilled to have you. I can't remember the last saxophone solos we've had perform with the Omaha Symphony, so this is going to be a treat, and it's especially going to be a treat because this just coincidentally lines up with the 100th anniversary of John Coltrane. Absolutely. And this Guillaume Connaissant ode to John Coltrane. It's perfect. It was completely by accident, maybe Joseph, it was not an accident on Joseph's part, but when he suggested it and we found it out, we were just like delighted across the board. So our first question for you, Joseph said he started on trumpet because his school had this like instrument fair where you got to go around and check out all the instruments. What was your introduction to saxophone?
My introduction was fairly similar. I forgot what they called it, but so in our intermediate school, went up to fifth grade, and if you're interested in band in fifth grade, or if you're interested in band when you get to middle school in sixth grade, all the fifth graders gather one night in the school cafeteria, or we called it the multi-purpose room because it was the gym and the cafeteria and, everything.
The cafegymnasium.
Yeah, there you go. And there were the band directors from the middle school were there, and there was there were tables all around, or stations all around the gymnasium, dedicated to essentially each instrument. And the 7th and 8th graders were manning the tables. So they were the people designated to kind of show these 5th graders the ropes and guide them to making their first sound. So it was fairly similar. I don't remember what that experience was like for me. I'm sure I sounded pretty bad on the saxophone. And the saxophone I knew going into that experience that I wanted to play the saxophone. So
Okay.
nobody could tell me any differently. But the thing with the saxophone is that a lot of people want to play the saxophone. And usually band directors don't have enough oboes or bassoons or clarinets. They need more clarinets than they need saxophones. But so I told them I wanted to play the saxophone. I tried out the saxophone. I made probably an ugly sound, and then I remember the band director saying, "We'll think about it. Maybe we'll start you off on clarinet, and then maybe a year or two into it, you can maybe switch to the saxophone." And now looking back on it, I realized that was the attempt to sort of make the band somewhat balanced. But I was pretty adamant on, no, I want to stick to the saxophone. So that's how I got started. A year into it, I wanted to quit. I wanted to switch instruments. I wanted to switch to percussion. But I had a great band director that said, give it another year and let's see, what happens. And that second year just kind of exploded for me.
Why did you want to play the saxophone? Like, what was the driving force behind, no, I already know which instrument I want?
It's not a very interesting story. I just thought it was cool.
That's totally fine. Like, was it maybe like the music you already heard growing up, or like what? I'm always curious what drives a kid towards a particular instrument.
Yeah. Honestly, I don't remember growing up hearing that much music. So it was more of the image of the saxophone that appealed to my fifth grade self. Just the image of, somebody on TV with their shades on playing the instrument. But, it just seemed like a very cool instrument. And that's what sort of drove me at the time. I know I never really had that sound stuck in my ear. So that wasn't the thing that drove me. It really was just the idea of the instrument that drove me into doing it. And I don't know if I really, I know my brother's experience in band, maybe he wanted to do that. I wanted to follow in his footsteps. And not necessarily by playing the trumpet, but just by, going through and giving the music thing a try, because I saw how interested he was in it once he kind of got started with it. But I started playing. My parents put me into music because I was sick at a young age. I had cancer, throughout elementary school and into middle school, and that was just a way for me to take my mind off of everything that was going on. So maybe I think that's the reason why I really started developing on the instrument, is because I was practicing so much, just to sort of have that outlet.
Oh my God. Would you say you ever became the epitome of cool that you had in mind? Like, do you ever catch a glimpse of yourself in shades with your instrument and you're like, yes, I've done it. I've made it.
I don't know. Maybe other people think that way, but I think maybe I'm still chasing it.
We'll have to get shades for you at some point, maybe during after hours.
There you go.
Okay, so you said during your second year on the instrument is when you really took off. So, but this was still in band. So were you playing primarily band music? Were you trying out jazz? Was it all of the above?
No. So, I mean, our school had a jazz band, but at the end of the day, I mean, I played in the jazz band, but at the end of the day, I really was, for some reason, just entrenched on the band side of the classical band side of things. And I think, quite simply, it was just because that's where I was finding the most success at the time. And I felt like that's where I was finding the most momentum. So yeah, all of this was in band. And I would say maybe 8th grade, going into high school, I started playing the saxophone in my church. So that's really where I started improvising. So I played in a kind of a charismatic Pentecostal church environment that, the music is all played by ear. Sometimes you hear glimpses of something that sounds like it could be, on an R&B set. It's sort of an improvisational kind of soulful music, and all played by ear, and just sort of responding to the singers or the preacher or the other musicians. So I was doing that on the weekends, of course, and during the week I was playing classical saxophone. I wasn't calling it that at the time, but I was playing classical saxophone in the band setting. And I think in the church, that's where I sort of developed my ear and started exploring different sounds on the instrument and things of that nature.
Okay, that's super cool. Because I grew up, I knew saxophone and band. And, all of us, Serena and I, having been both old jazz band hats, I always associated saxophone squarely with jazz. Like that was my first understanding. This is where this instrument probably began. This is where it belongs. And so when I went down the rabbit hole of starting to meet classical saxophonists, both at school and then professionally afterwards, it's like, oh, there's a whole completely other world of saxophone that I've just never touched. And then in preparing for this interview, finally reading the history of the saxophone and its invention, it's bonkers. And it had absolutely it had no start in jazz whatsoever. It was if we could dive down this for just like a hot second.
Absolutely.
I'm curious when you discovered this too, because it was invented by Adolph Sax, which is perfect. But it was a legit classical, potentially orchestral instrument that would have been in orchestras by now as a main staple if the French hadn't been very, very petty people and Sax had been a nicer person. It was a bad combination of petty man who wants to bogart every other instrument maker meets French musicians who are willing to boycott, concerts and rehearsals if they see his instrument on stage. At what point in your journey, did you start realizing that there was this huge, rich tradition of everything you were doing, this huge history behind it? Did you ever touch on that, or was that something you discovered when you went to college, or like, what's your linkage to that amazing history?
Yeah. So that it really was just something I started realizing and exploring when I got to college. In in high school, I was just playing my instrument, just practicing a lot, and like I was self-taught and never really had a private instructor until I went to this boarding high school. This new boarding high school called the Governor's School in my 11th grade year. So in college, that's where I really started to hear about the history of the saxophone. And, the saxophone, of course, like I always knew that it was sort of like the emblem of jazz. Saxophone and jazz were one. But jazz didn't really start coming about until the early 1900s, right? As an American art form. So the saxophone being invented in the 1840s, like Adolph Sax would say, "What is jazz?" Right? So like that wasn't a thing at the time. So the thing that was interesting to me when I first started hearing about the history of the saxophone is that the saxophone Adolph Sax actually created two bodies of saxophones, a saxophone family from soprano or sopranino all the way down to like bass that were pitched in the key of C and F. And we don't really hear about those today, but in the second saxophone family that was pitched in the key of B flat and E flat. And just tell me if I'm going too far down this. So that second family pitched in a key of B flat and E flat. And Sax's master plan essentially was that the instruments pitched in the key of C and F, those were meant to be played in the orchestra. Those were meant to be the orchestral saxophones. And if you look at some early transcriptions or the early scores of, say, like Strauss's, um, uh, the name is escaping me, Symphony Domestica, kind of at the turn of the 20th century, like there's an optional saxophone family that can be played in that piece. And more than likely, those were played on C and F saxophones. And then, as history kind of went on, like those C and F horns kind of petered out, they weren't manufactured anymore. But the B flat and E flat instruments were meant to be played in the military bands. And I think that's where the saxophone really was played the most often in the military band settings. Because I think it was, I read somewhere that it was all of Adolph Sax's horns were played in the military bands. So even like the weird ones, like, he had these saxophones. He had he sort of remodeled or remade the key workings of the bass clarinet, and he pretty much is attributed to making the bass clarinet playable. Of course, that was played in the military bands, and even like some of his odd instruments were played in that setting. But it never really took off that strong in the orchestral world. There are some assumptions we can make of it. Maybe some of it was, economical, to, hiring another musician or instrument to come in and play in the orchestra. Maybe that wasn't in the cards at the time. Maybe some of it, as you mentioned, Danny, was kind of petty. But I also imagine some of it was at the time, there was no pedagogy like centered around this new instrument. And the saxophone also, like, it's important to note that it's an invented instrument. Like there's no precursor essentially to the saxophone, like, some of our counterparts. So it's a very new instrument, and is an invented instrument. And nobody knew how to play it outside of Adolph Sax. And they pretty much gave him a position at the Paris Conservatory. He was the first saxophone teacher at the Paris Conservatory now that has like a long history of like amazing saxophonists coming out of it. Adolph Sax was the first teacher there. And you almost had to sort of go to Adolph Sax to learn how to play it, at least at the level that, was demanded in the orchestral world. This established institution of orchestra, I can imagine that it was hard to sort of get into that system without having a strong pedagogy like built around this new creation.
Such a good point. I didn't even think about the pedagogy of it, and possibly the idea that if you have, on one hand, kudos to Adolph Sax, because he created something, and then he created a job for himself, and then he created job security for himself. That's tremendous. But then if you're very proprietary about who teaches and how they teach it and what they teach on, it probably would take a long time for that to actually take off and spread, like generations for it to be more available, the teaching of it and the method of it. So that's super, super cool. And despite that, you had composers still including it, sometimes optional, like you said, and sometimes very, very much on purpose, because the color that this instrument is capable of in any configuration, whatever key it's in, whatever like version of it, the color and the style and the absolute breadth of what the instrument can do is really incredible. And you said you had no private instruction until really like 11th grade. So was you were learning things by ear and playing in band and listening to people around you. Like, how did you start to cultivate that for yourself?
How did I start to cultivate?
All the different things. That's like, when did you? I guess what I'm really asking is, when did you fall in love with the instrument enough to realize that you needed to keep going with it and figure out everything it could do?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it was the school I sort of mentioned in passing called the Governor's School. Um, my brother went to a summer program, the Governor's School summer program. It was sort of like a 2 or 3 week intensive workshop that had, music and conducting. And I think that's where he was introduced to conducting, maybe. And also like all other art forms, dance and the visual arts and creative writing. So I went to the summer program. I want to say it was the summer after my freshman year in high school, after my ninth grade year in high school. And after that year, after that 2 week workshop where I did have a private lesson, and that was my first like private lesson, but I never really had a steady teacher until 11th grade. But after that summer, when my parents were picking me up, they announced, hey, we're building this new high school. It's going to start in the year, I forgot what year it was, but it was a year after, this summer. It's going to start in this year, and it's only going to be for 11th and 12th grade students, and it's going to be completely free private lessons, free room and board. It's the Governor's School residential program. So I told my parents I wanted to go to that after my experience at the summer program. And when I went to that program, or when I enrolled into that high school, it completely changed my life. At that time, I didn't know. First of all, I didn't know that I can take the saxophone and make a career out of it. Like, nobody really ever told me that. And I never really saw that. Maybe just my background, like that wasn't really something that I knew existed, let alone playing the saxophone outside of the jazz setting. So when I got to this high school, this was the first time I was looking around and I saw other peers my age that were just as hungry and enthusiastic about this as I was. So that was one. And then two, I had a teacher at that school who really took me under his wing. And that was really the first time that I had that sort of one-on-one, like intense, in-depth instruction, and I really thrived off of it. I couldn't get enough of it. And the pivotal moment for me that said I wanted to do this for the rest of my life was that that first semester of my first year at the Governor's School, my teacher gave a recital, and that was the first time I've ever heard that was the first time I heard a recital, period. But it was also the first time I heard a classical saxophone player live. I've heard recordings and whatnot. But that was the first time I was in the same room and heard a live performance. And we all know what the impacts of live music can have on somebody. And that completely floored me. I still remember everything he played. I still remember how I felt, after I left the recital hall that night. I remember saying to myself, this is it. This is what I want to do. I want to play on that level, and I want to impact people the way he impacted me. And as an educator, I want to have an impact on the people coming behind me, and have that same kind of impact that my former teacher had on me. So it really was like that for me, and it was just gung ho after that.
Serena,
So-
go ahead.
No, I just was wondering. So, was kind of because your educator had such an impact on you, was music education, always kind of your path forward on the saxophone? Because I know for a lot of orchestral instruments, it's like, yes, our that moment of being surrounded by our peers in youth orchestra and going, I want to play in this orchestra. If you don't necessarily have that option as a saxophone, kind of where did you see your options, and what were you, and did that change throughout, or, did you ever want to play in a military band? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a good question, because it did evolve. And sort of also like piggybacking on what we were talking about with like the history of the saxophone, like the classical saxophone essentially has been like, for lack of a better words or better phrase, like searching for a home. We're like nomads in some way. And at the time when I was in high school, all the prominent saxophone players, classical saxophone players, when I read their bios and everything, they were college professors. So, and they were amazing players, and they were college professors. So that was the extent of what where my mind could take me at that given time, what I was exposed to. So I was saying that I wanted to be a college professor, and as a college professor, I would play, my faculty recitals and, things of that nature. And also at the time, there were, of course, like, saxophonists were playing pictures and playing Ravel and, those kind of things in the orchestra. But there were really no saxophonists being asked to play concertos with orchestras, at least not at the it's still sort of like a small scale kind of thing, but not at the rate that you're seeing saxophonists from time to time pop up in front of orchestras now. That it wasn't like that when I was in high school. So I didn't even have that in my periphery. So as you kind of mentioning, Serena, my career ambitions and path sort of evolved as I grew, and also as I sort of allowed myself to dream bigger, and also as I was sort of like exposed to more, to more things.
That's so cool. I love that you had that pivotal moment at a recital, because I also distinctly remember the first time I heard a bass soloist in recital, and it was Gabriele Raggianti, and he played the Bottesini, and I felt like I could have run a marathon after that concert.
Yeah.
Like sprinting around the concert hall. Like it's almost like no one told you it could be that way.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're hearing it for yourself, and it just completely blows your mind. And to try and do, so when I was looking up John Coltrane, when I was refreshing my memory, that moment for him was Charlie Parker. And he had no idea that saxophone could sound the way that Parker was doing it. And I'm so curious how you have all these different elements coming together. You're venturing out, you've decided you're going to be a college professor and do recitals, but you're encountering pieces, like you've achieved those goals, which is amazing. And obviously your worldview has broadened so much since you started doing that. And now you're encountering concertos like the Connaissant, where he's taking these elements from outside of the classical realm and bringing them in. How do you even start wrapping your head around something like this concerto?
Yeah. And it's been kind of like a journey, because I feel like this piece in some way encapsulates who I am as a musician, as an artist. And maybe it took me this long to understand that. sort of like when I first started playing this piece, several years ago. And the reason why I say I feel like it encapsulates who I am is because, of course, I'm a concert saxophonist. I've had and have a lot of experience playing in other genres, gospel music, pop music, and throughout college. I said in high school or in middle school, I wasn't really into jazz, but in college, in grad school, I was essentially a double major without being a double major. So I was really, putting sinking my claws into the jazz side of the instrument. And my first college job ever was I was a professor of jazz and saxophone. So it was sort of like more on the jazz side than on the classical saxophone side of things. But so with all of these different experiences and styles and sounds that I feel like I've had the opportunity to develop in my own playing, I feel like the Kanasan is sort of like similar, in that it's not a jazz piece. It's a contemporary concert saxophone concerto. Every note and every rhythm has its place, right? But there are elements that Kanasan intends that are drawn from, the dedicatee of this piece, like John Coltrane. So how John Coltrane, the spirit of and the energy that's behind his improvised solos, how he weaves in and out of these different complex subdivisions of the beat, while still staying like right in time. I think that's sort of what I hear when I hear John Coltrane. And then when I'm reading this music, whereas John Coltrane would be improvising, I have to find some way to channel the spirit of improvised music while being absolutely perfect with what's going on the page, so to speak. But your question was how do I wrap my mind around it? I don't know. I think that, I think something that I am really drawn to in this piece is that, I really feel like, it also speaks to who I am, as an artist. And so I've been listening to Coltrane, but I've also been listening to, saxophonists, but I've also been listening to, just a lot of music in general. And I just think that my lived experience also is, I feel like, is on display in this piece in particular.
Love that so much. What do you obviously talked about Coltrane's approach to improv. Like the term I kept finding was sheets of sound, and critics couldn't seem to decide when A Love Supreme came out if Coltrane wasn't the greatest improviser who ever lived, or if it was the most, quote, meticulously planned album of music ever written. Like they couldn't decide if it was in the moment or if he'd really just planned it out. What do you have all these giants that you've been gathering from and that have inspired you? What do you get from the Coltranes of the world, or who are you listening to now that just gets you so excited to approach your work every single day?
Are you talking about jazz musicians, or are you talking or
classical
just any
saxophonists in general? Yeah.
Yeah. So, I have just as everybody does, I have my heroes, and Tim McAllister is somebody that I've been listening to for years, and we've grown to be like good friends now. But he's somebody that Yeah, I listen to and I draw inspiration from, but a lot of my listening is coming from. I like listening to art song and
Okay.
um, I remember in college my teacher exposed me to um, uh, Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau, who's no longer with us, and the sound that came through my headphones when I first sort of um, uh, experienced, you know, his voice for the first time, um, um, not only transformed or opened up a box of different sounds that I never even heard before. But it also in that moment, I started trying to figure out like how can I um, bring some of this sound out of this metal tube, out of this saxophone. So I feel like I listen to a lot of flute players. I listen to a lot of string players. I listen to a lot of piano. And I also listen to a lot of saxophone as well. But I feel like, um, um, let me just stick to saxophone. I listen to a lot of Tim McAllister. I listen to another saxophonist around my age. His name is Stephen Banks. And he's playing a lot of concerti around the world right now as well. He's somebody that I admire and respect as well. And then there are other people that have had impacts on my life. Donald Sinta, who was my teacher and Tim McAllister's teacher at the University of Michigan. He's since retired, but he has been somebody that completely changed the way I thought about music and thought about this career and a path forward. So yeah, there are a lot of musicians that I listen to, and there's also like a lot of musicians that aren't necessarily playing a lot today, but I really glean information from quite a bit.
Go ahead.
I think like conductors, very nerdy people in general, and I find we very often talk about music and kind of exchange notes in that way, or about certain pieces. Always ends up in some kind of conversation like that, and it feels like the saxophone soloist world is so small. Do you guys ever compare notes in that same way as well on certain pieces or experiences, or is that something that's generally talked about among soloists?
I think more and more it's happening. I was talking to somebody the other day about this because I felt like coming out of college, I felt like certain aspects around the what goes on behind the curtain, like the business side of music. I didn't necessarily have any. Nobody was either talking about it, or I didn't know the right people to ask, or I didn't know the right questions to ask. So that's something that I wish I got out of college. But now, when I have questions about certain things, I have a couple of people that I can go to, and and we can, like you said, compare notes, or I can sit in the advisee chair and be mentored by some people that have been doing this for a long time. And that's something that I'm really excited about, because I think that there are just musicians everywhere that probably hold information close to the chest, and they don't want to share it with a lot of people. But I think the saxophone community really is a community, because we're all trying to strive for like in some way a common goal of just pushing this new instrument is still like a new instrument in some way, like pushing this new instrument forward. So sometimes through conversation, like just shooting the breeze conversation, and sometimes through like just pointed questions that you might ask somebody. I think that, I feel like the sharing does happen. Um, sometimes with the right questions, or sometimes, with the right people that have that information. So, yeah, I have a couple people in mind that I call or sit down with, have a cup of coffee, and just listen to speak, just so that I can um, understand some things that might be a little bit foreign to me, or that I might not have the breadth of experience that they might have, or in a specific piece. Like I spoke to uh, my colleague Tim McAllister about this piece, the Kanasan, the first time I was working it up to play it with an orchestra. So yeah, that does happen, and I'm kind of grateful to be in a saxophone in the saxophone community, because we do try to share information as much as we can.
You, just out of curiosity, do you remember the first time you realized that you were the advisor and not the advisee?
That's a good question. Um, my mind goes straight to um, the moment I kind of stepped out of, well, I'm always in student mode, but stepped out of the traditional, student mode into the position of being a professor. And I always had this strong conviction as a teacher that, these students are paying a lot of money to come to said university, to um, um, and they look to me as a mentor, as somewhat of a guide to, figure out how to do this thing. Um, um, and I think that conviction of being a college professor, um, definitely um, to my own, private studio, like I definitely know that at that time when I stepped into that role, like, hey, I'm somewhat of a mentor now, and what does that mean? And what do they need? And maybe I had to I remember kind of sitting down and thinking about what are some of the things that I needed when I was a student. So maybe let's start there. And I think as a college professor, that's the first time I really realized that I have that capacity. And um, yeah, I don't know if there was like a specific moment, but like several years ago, I realized that even beyond my scope of my individual studio, that there are saxophonists that are and musicians that are recognizing some of the things that I'm doing, and they're looking to me for inspiration and things of that nature. Um, um, so I don't know if that was a specific instance, but I certainly see that and feel the weight, and that's something that's definitely comes with the territory, but it's also exciting um, um, to to be able to um, pour out some information to students that or musicians that um, are interested in what they might be able to glean from me.
You, I mean, yeah, you said the weight. I feel like the weight's the right word. It should be a great responsibility to take on mentorship. Are there pieces that you still have on your bucket list that you want the opportunity to tackle that you haven't gotten that chance yet?
So I some of the music that's most that is most impactful to me, or maybe something that I am drawn to the most, is something that showcases the lyricism and the beauty that the saxophone can be. And I've played this piece several times, but the Alexander Glazunov Concerto, that's something that I've played like several times. But when we say bucket list, I would say my bucket list is, or my bucket piece is to play that piece with, um, you know, a, um, you know, an Omaha Symphony, or a, like a well respected, amazing, um, orchestra, and just sort of like sit in the bed of that sound. That's something that I would love to see happen, is to play like one of my um, favorite pieces that I've grown up playing like throughout my career, and to sort of like see that come full circle, and to be able to play it in this new space, in this new level in some way. So one of the first, I would say the second time I played the Glazunov Concerto with orchestra was with my brother. And this sort of like an interesting story, but like for one of my master's recitals at the University of Michigan, I had this idea to, I'm going to hire, without money, some student musicians, and I'm going to form a
Pizza and beer. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep. Yep. There you go. I'm going to form an orchestra. So my master's recital, I might have played one piece with piano, but I played three concertos with orchestra, and I flew my brother down. I think at the time he was assistant with Atlanta. I could be getting that wrong, but I flew my brother down, and we did the performance, and we did the Glazunov Concerto as one of the pieces on that program, and that was just sort of like a magical experience.
Wow! Just trying to imagine the reaction of a sibling, like, "Hey, so I'm planning my master's recital. I'd like you to conduct it," and having to back up and explain that you're going to hire an orchestra and pay them in pizza and beer, and would you please come conduct? So Joseph gave us permission to ask this. How, and this is, you've played this with him, you've played the Conason with him before. How much, what's the trust situation like? Because between conductor and soloist, regardless of relationship, it has to be really strong. But what's it like to prepare something like this with a sibling, and what's the trust situation like there?
I think the trust is very high, and like I'm pausing to like think about it, because I'm thinking about, is the trust really high because I just trust the people I'm collaborating with, or is the trust even higher because I'm collaborating with somebody I've spent my life with? And it's probably a little bit of both, maybe more of the latter. So I think that so the trust is high, and I think that my one of my passions as a musician is chamber music, and one of the joys of chamber music to me is you can spend hours and hours and hours contemplating on this phrase, or the scope of this piece, or the arc of this piece, and you can, work out all the technique and how you want to play this section and that section. But when you get into the rehearsal, I think one of the joys of chamber music is being able to sort of um, trust your work, let that go, and hear what else is possible by collaborating with the person that's next to you. Kind of back in my teacher mode, I think one of the challenges to teach, college, some of my college quartets is that, or just students in general is, you've practiced it this way, but the other people on stage are talking as well. So like how it's a collaborative effort. So that's just been like just a huge passion of mine, and something that that makes music even the more enjoyable to me is stepping out on stage, in this case with my brother. And I'm not in the first maybe couple rehearsals, and just coming in, and not necessarily imposing how I want to play this. But there's definitely some of that, and he's not necessarily imposing this is how the way we play it. But there definitely is some of that, and somewhere in that, this magical sort of collaborative meshing of the orchestra's vision, my brother's vision, my vision, somewhere like we mesh together, and a new magic emerges. And I feel like that's sort of like the beauty of chamber music. And I'm even going to call this chamber music because it's just highly like, in my sense, this is like high chamber music skills, being able to be in the moment, listen to what's going on around you, and play to the moment. And maybe that's the reason why I trust him so much, is because I feel like he's the same way. It seems like, when I'm playing, even doing a small nuanced gesture, like I feel like he catches it. And I don't think he necessarily catches it just because I'm his brother. I think he catches it because he has amazing ears, amazing like he's living in the moment. So I trust him because he's my brother, but I also trust him because he's a beautiful musician.
I feel like that's also this approach to making music is, especially when you're talking about a concerto that's dedicated to one of the greatest musicians of our time, right? Like what's the greatest gift you can give in dedication is anytime you hear a jazz ensemble that's working well together, it's because they're listening to each other and they're in the moment. It's like, what's the greatest gift you can give to this concerto is treating it the same way.
Yeah.
I love that so much. Just have one more question for you. Okay. Obviously, actually, no, I have two questions. This concerto is played on alto and soprano saxophone, but do you have like a favorite? Is there a model or a range that you kind of gravitate toward naturally?
Yeah, I would say that I spent the most time on the alto saxophone. That's what I started on in sixth grade and all throughout high school, and it wasn't really until college that I picked up a soprano. But now I would say that my voice maybe is on the top three of the traditional saxophone sizes, so soprano, alto, and tenor. Serena, I'll let you take care of the baritone. Yeah, I think that's something that's just in today's saxophone pedagogy, is that we call ourselves like saxophonists, and not necessarily, at least on the classical side, not necessarily an alto saxophonist. So we have experience playing all of them. But if I had to pick one that where I feel like I feel most at home, I would say it's alto, and then maybe the second is soprano.
My husband wanted me to promise that I would note the British call
Saxophonist.
saxophonist. Okay, so you already say that one more time.
Saxophonist.
I love it.
It's beautiful.
It's tremendous. It's right up there with aluminium. Okay, last question. If you had 30 minutes on stage, you had access to every instrument or position available, and there were no consequences, and you could try anything, what would you try?
What do you mean, no consequences?
No one's going to get mad at you for like taking their cello and messing with it for a half an hour, or there's not going to be any principal percussion running after you. Like, no. Like if you go to mess with the bass drum.
So I have two. I think I have two answers to that question. Two short answers. The first would be, I was going to say cello, but any stringed instrument. And I say, what do you mean by consequences? Is because like there would definitely be some like pointing and laughing, and so like I don't think I've ever touched a string instrument in my life, and I hear the magic that can come from those instruments, and I know for a fact that after the 30 minutes, I'm still going to sound like it's the first 30 seconds and it's not going to be good. But that's something I would like to try. No consequences. And if I break it, like hopefully I don't have to sell my house or anything like that but the other position is, I would be interested in seeing what it feels like to give a downbeat, to conduct 4 bars of, whatever masterwork is, kind of in 4/4. I would just love that experience just to see what that feels like. So I would say the podium, the conductor would be my second choice.
Love it. I think we can arrange that, right?
I don't know.
We all know a guy that we're.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Robert, thank you so much. This has been a delight.
Absolutely. Thank you both. I'm very much looking forward to, coming to Omaha in just a short few weeks.
We can't wait to have you. So thank you. This is going to be awesome. Can't wait.
Absolutely.